Does this home look familiar? Does it look like something from your nightmares? It is in fact the home of Victor Creel from Netflix's Stranger Things. It is where Henry Creel honed his powers and where he attempted to kill his entire family, and where he later establishes a lair as Vecna in the Upside Down. Both inside and outside, it looks like a perfectly haunted house with Gothic Victorian architecture and ornate period furnishings. While the story of Henry Creel is fiction, we think, one prominent family did live in this home for 80 years. It is here that they celebrated birthdays and anniversaries, and where some took their final breaths. What dark secret does this home really keep? This home was built in 1882 in Rome, Georgia, by Colonel Hamilton Yancey and his wife Florence. The main house is over 5,200 square feet with 6 bedrooms and 6 bathrooms, featuring a grand staircase and beautiful built-ins, and was known as Claremont. The first structure on this property was the cottage, which sits behind the main house and was designed to be a simpler version of the grand home. It is here that the Yancey family lived while the main house was constructed between 1879 and 1882. Hamilton Yancey was born September 27, 1848 in Georgia. He graduated from the University of Georgia and later the University of Virginia. He began practicing law in Rome, Georgia in 1871. On April 29, 1874, he married Miss Florence Patterson, the daughter of a physician who was born July 18, 1856. 10 months after their marriage, Hamilton and Florence welcomed their first child, Julia, on February 13, 1875. She was followed by son Benjamin in 1877, son Robert in 1878, and son Thomas in January 1879, the year that the family moved into this cottage, eagerly awaiting the completion of the main home. Florence was likely very busy with 4 children ages 4 and under at the tender age of 22, while her husband was busy attending his legal career. On March 6, 1879, 4-year-old Julia passed away. It is unclear if the death was the result of an accident or illness, or if the death was before or after the family moved onto this property, but to have a child die so young must have been devastating and may have cast an ominous shadow over the property. The Yanceys moved into the main house in 1882. These photos show the interior of the Yanceys' home, likely taken in the early 20th century. I wonder if the portrait of the young girl to the right could be Julia. When we compare the home as it was when the Yanceys lived here to the way it was in 2019 when it was a bed and breakfast, compared to as it stands today following a major renovation, it is fascinating how the space is relatively unchanged aside from the furnishings. The impressive built-ins and bookcases that serve the Yancey family remain. These rooms hold many memories for many people across many years. It was in these rooms that Florence gave birth to 4 daughters, Sarah, Mary Lou, Florence, and Claire, and where she and Hamilton raised their 7 children with the help of several servants. Eldest son Benjamin graduated from the University of Georgia 30 years after his father with a law degree. He went on to become the youngest mayor of Rome. However, younger brother Robert took a very different path, one much more along the storylines of Stranger Things. In 1899, 21-year-old Robert was almost murdered by a local man named Allie Waters. Allie was found guilty of attempted murder after firing 4 shots at Robert, who ducked behind a tree. Neither man ever explained what the fight was about, but Allie did go to jail for his role. A year later, Robert got into a fight with Allie's brother, Crampton Waters, at the town skating rink, where Waters cut Robert in the head with a rock. Neighborhood fights among young men is not unusual, but trouble for Robert continued. In 1902, Robert married Edna Lamasina from New York. She too came from a wealthy family with servants and a summer home, but I don't think she was fully aware of Robert's troubled past. 9 months after their wedding, they welcomed a daughter, Phoebe, but in 1904, the home where Robert and his young family lived caught fire. No one was injured, and the source of the fire was undetermined. Was it the Waters family taking revenge, or just an accident? We will never know, but Robert's misfortune followed him. In the 1910 U.S. Census, Robert, Edna, and Phoebe were listed as living at this home with Hamilton and Florence. However, Robert was also listed on the 1910 U.S. Census in Florida, where he had relocated in March of that year. Robert was working and living with a man named Zach Spinks and his wife Helena. Both men worked in the brick manufacturing business, with Robert presumably planning to welcome his wife and daughter to Florida once he was established. But by the fall of 1910, everything changed. On this night of Saturday, November 26th, Robert and his friend Wiley were driving to Robert's brickyard when they encountered Zach Spinks driving on the highway, likely in his new Maxwell Model G, as seen here. Robert got out of his car and told Wiley that he had a score to settle with Spinks. Robert waved down Zach's car, forcing it to a stop, and reached into his pocket as if to draw a weapon, at which time Spinks pulled out a shotgun and shot Robert twice, once in the face, tearing away his tongue and severing his windpipe. Robert died at 2 a.m. the next morning after several agonizing hours. Zach immediately turned himself in to the authorities and said that the trouble was the result of Robert's attention to his wife, Helena. Zach was eventually acquitted of all charges on the grounds of self-defense. There are so many unanswered questions surrounding Robert's death. Why would Robert want to confront Zach in such a bold way? What score did Robert have to settle with the man whose wife he had allegedly pursued? Did Zach attack Robert or Helena when they found out about their relationship? Was Robert in love with Helena, a clandestine relationship which blossomed as the two lived together under Zach's roof? Whatever happened between Robert and Helena, Zach clearly thought Helena was a willing participant as the couple divorced shortly after Robert's death. Zach remarried in 1915, but Helena simply disappeared. She was never reported missing, but I found no other records for her after Robert's death. It is as if she died with Robert. With fights, attempted murder, house fires, suspected adultery, and finally murder, it is difficult to say whether Robert's trouble was just in his nature, or if he had a mental illness that led to his erratic behavior, or if he was just ill-fated. But his untimely death affected many lives, and his loss was deeply felt within these walls. The years that followed Robert's death were quite full here at the Yancey home, though the family's grief was often noted. On September 12, 1911, daughter Mary Lou married Donald Gillies, with a brief reception held here at the home before Mary Lou and Donald left for their honeymoon, after which they returned to Mexico, where Donald directed mining operations for a steel company. Several parties were hosted for the family's daughters, Sarah, Florence, and Claire, who were searching for suitable husbands. In July 1914, a large party was held here with the living room full of baskets of brightly colored zinnias and fragrant Killarney roses. In the dining room was a centerpiece of crystal and roses and tulle. Florence was married here on June 1, 1919 in the drawing room, which was adorned with roses. On April 29, 1924, Hamilton and Florence celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary here with a large party that brought all 6 children and 8 grandchildren together, along with many members of Southern society. Later years brought more grief and hardship. Eldest son Benjamin suffered a heart attack on May 16, 1928, and passed away at the age of 50, leaving a wife and son. Hamilton and Florence have now buried their first 3 children. The loss must have been too much for Florence, who passed away here at home on September 18, 1929, at the age of 75, after a long illness which involved her kidneys. Hamilton continued living in the home, where he too developed kidney problems, before contracting tuberculosis around September 1, 1931. He passed away here on November 15, 1931. Youngest son Thomas Yancey moved into the home with his wife Nell. By 1940, Thomas's sister Florence was living at the cottage, following her husband's death in 1933. By 1950, Florence had moved on, but Sister Claire was living in the cottage with her daughter, along with Thomas and Nell in the main house. The home remained in the Yancey family until 1967, 1 year after Thomas Hamilton's death. In the 85 years that this home served the Yancey family, it was not only the place where several of the children were born, but also where they grew up, celebrated weddings and anniversaries, and where many of the Yancey children returned during their adult lives, as the unexpected twists and turns of life can sometimes lead you back home. It was the backdrop for the tremendous loss of sons Robert and Benjamin, and possibly young daughter Julia, and where Hamilton and Florence spent their last days. I'm sure none of the original inhabitants of this home ever expected it to become the setting of one of the most popular streaming television shows. And while nothing tragic is confirmed to have happened here, the misfortune that plagued Robert Yancey was certainly cultivated here, with its dark tentacles reaching into the lives of the Waters family, Zach and Elena Spinks, and the rest of the Yancey family, perhaps not unlike the darkness of Henry Creel, which transcends time and place.